At its core, Beef is about relationships and how our personal decisions affect those around us for good and for bad. It explores the exponential damage that can be caused by individual brokenness. The show never forces a specific message on you overtly, but I do remember getting a clear message from it by watching the events unfold. In this video, I'm going to explore that message, and I'll begin by pointing out that Beef is, in some ways, like...
One of them is a Russian word, zabornost, which is usually translated universality or the cosmic dimension of divine providence. We are each responsible for all. That was one of the few ideas that radically changed my mind simply by reading a novel. Dostoevsky didn't prove it to me, he showed it to me in The Brothers Karamazov.
This clip is relevant because he elucidates how the events of the story convinced him of a truth by showing it through the story and not just saying it directly. Beef had the same effect on me. It's not just action scenes and clever payoffs that satisfy us. The simple dynamics of human relationships played out by characters in a show can so move us that we choose to interact with the world differently. One of the things that makes Beef unique is the setup. It's called Beef because it shows the viewers everything that happens as a consequence of one road rage incident involving the two main characters. It explores their conflict, their beef. How this event, which is seemingly isolated at first, then grows and affects more and more people, some in terrifyingly horrible ways, is how Beef shows us that
we are each responsible for all.
Within the show, at the center point of this network of individuals, we find Danny and Amy seem like opposites at first, but as the story goes on, you realize that they are really the same in many ways. They both rely on others for validation, and they also both try to project a certain image of themselves onto the world. I think one of the core reasons they hate each other so much is because of how similar they are. They see all of their own worst aspects reflected in each other, and so whenever they interact, they're face to face with everything they hate about themselves. And while others may see them as good people on the surface, they can both clearly see how dishonest and hypocritical the other is. They are hyper aware of these qualities in themselves, even if at times unconsciously, and so they spot them immediately when interacting with each other. I think they also partly enjoy their beef, since there's finally someone who really sees them for the first time. This exhilaration of hatred and revenge obviously doesn't end well. A road rage incident started the beef, and arguably another road rage incident creates the circumstances for them to finally reconcile it. It's only when they're stranded at the end of the show that they get to come to terms with who they are, who they really are. And in many ways, while speaking with each other, they're really having a conversation with themselves. Although, this is not the only time they reveal their inner life. Their personas do momentarily fall away at certain points throughout the show. When the facade falls for Amy, it's when she's speaking with her therapist, and unlike previous sessions, finally breaks down and starts to reveal a little bit of herself. For Danny, it's during
that we may worship Him joyfully with all of our hearts.
Are you hurting and broken within? Overwhelmed by the weight of your sin? Jesus is...
This is my favorite scene in the whole show. This is when Danny breaks down and cries while attending a worship service. Of course, he does go on to scam the church and use the money to get his parents a house, but that comes later, so it doesn't affect the sincerity of this moment. And I actually think it is one of the most sincere representations of how heavy the weight of sin can be on a person. This scene also doesn't try to say something about Christians, it just provides an accurate demonstration of what many people do go through when they feel moved during a church service. I also think this scene adds a lot of depth to Danny as a character. It reveals the weight he carries, the secrets he keeps, which I'll talk more about later, and the fact that he's desperate for some stability in his otherwise chaotic life. I actually think it's this need for stability that causes him to quickly mask his problems. He might feel that if he unloaded all of his issues onto the church members, that this would only be perceived as shameful. Even after his persona briefly slips off during this worship scene, he very quickly puts on a face again when interacting with the church members. He doesn't want all the inner beef he carries to taint any other relationship, and in some ways, this continual effort to convince others that he doesn't need help keeps him in a perpetual state of needing help. Amy does the same thing with her psychologist, and both Danny and Amy do this really with everyone in their life. Sometimes what we think keeps us safe is actually what kills us, and I think this is poetically represented by, in my opinion, the most shocking scene in the entire series. The scene when Jordan is killed by the panic room door is so brutal and surprising and foreign to the kind of violence seen in the show up to that point, you almost can't help but wonder, where did that come from? I think the show wants to shock us because it wants to convince us of the large-scale consequences of our decisions. We have a much larger impact on the lives of those around us than we might realize, and seeing Jordan so brutally killed hammered that realization into me even more. I mention again my earlier point that our social masks can sometimes be so contrary to who we actually are that the inner tension can slowly kill us. The facade of safety, the persona of security, the panic room in a scary situation might just be more dangerous. And this emotional poetry slaps us all in the face by seeing the supreme and devilish irony of watching Jordan be crushed to death by her own panic room door. But even this was not the moment that shook me to my core. Even this A24 macabre tip of the malicious hat did not hit me as deeply as. Danny's brother Paul isn't the most impressive guy when you first meet him. He seems lazy, uninterested, and detached. As the story goes on though, you begin to see how often he's manipulated and lied to by Danny. While I was initially frustrated by Paul, the scene that changed everything for me was when I saw Danny secretly throw Paul's university applications in the trash. My frustration with Paul transferred to Danny, and then it became anger. For Paul, I couldn't help but feel immense pity. Danny, through his actions, is constantly holding his brother back, and you see this in short-term, immediate ways throughout the series. But when it's revealed that Danny sabotaged any hope his brother might have had of pursuing studies, you see how long-term and large the consequences of Danny's actions are. Standing alone in a room and making that quiet decision may seem like a private weight to carry for Danny, but Paul really does suffer for it. And the worst part is he doesn't even know what he doesn't know. It's impossible to predict what would have happened with Paul's applications, but the emotional damage caused to him, not even getting a reply back from an institution, is a level of betrayal enacted by Danny that just left me shaking. This is one of the secrets Danny keeps I mentioned earlier. It's even more visual poetry when Danny lifts his brother up to escape the home at the end of the series instead of pulling him down as he had done their entire lives. He does then tell Paul the truth, but that doesn't undo the damage, and Paul is then shot. And I think this is to hammer the following point home. The consequences of our individual decisions don't care if we've reformed since we made those decisions. We still have to live with the consequences. This is the lesson Beef showed me without ever needing to say it overtly. We are, in the biggest sense, responsible for all, but we can't see the impact our lives will have on the entire world. We can, however, focus on the individuals around us. Our hatred, our anger, our resentment, our pride, our stubbornness, these really do make the world a worse place. And of course, understanding and acknowledging our faults, asking for forgiveness, forgiving others, and seeking reconciliation with those we've hurt really do make the world a better place. This is the inner tension we all have to live with, the inner battle we all have to fight every day, to carry the weight of the responsibility of our decisions, to choose to do what is right, because the consequences of acting against others are unpredictable and sometimes horrific. Beef does a marvelous job of showing us all of this without ever having to say it directly.